Hey, friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is my buddy Mike Bubb, and he's going to tell you some great Jimmy Martin stories.
Back a few years ago, I was on tour with a country artist named Ashley Monroe, and we had a bus call out in Hermitage at the Kroger out there. It's a big, giant parking lot and easy to maneuver buses around, kind of a common pickup place for bands to leave from because the store's there in the big parking lot. But anyway, we were there. We got dropped off one Sunday, midday, coming in from someplace. And I thought, I'm going to go by Jimmy Martin's house and see what's going on out there, see if anybody's around or if there's anything happening out there. This is long after he passed away. And so I went out there, and his limousine was still there. It's kind of the tires were getting flat on it and just sitting in the driveway. And some of the mailbox letters that he had put on there across the back that said, sunny side of the mountain and all that some of them were starting to come off. I remember his old Pete's best coon dog in Tennessee's doghouse was still there. And it was just striking. It was like a piece of folk art because the guy had written, who built it. He painted it all on there, where it was made and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, God, that's a museum piece right there. Somebody needs to preserve that thing. And he had a pickup truck there, and I looked around in there. I thought I might find a little treasure in there, but I didn't find anything but just trash, pretty much. But in the carport was this furniture, this couch and a chair, and it was the sort of Western kitschy type of furniture with the wagon wheel arms on it, and the back had the back of the couch had a horse embroidered on the back of it, and then the chair had a saddle embroidered in it. And I'm from the Southwest, so that stuff always catches my eye, and I like that kind of stuff. And I thought, God, I'd love to have that couch. And I was tempted to just, I was only one there, and I was tempted to just, what if I just loaded this thing up and hauled it out of here and left a note for somebody? But I didn't know if maybe the neighbors were looking after it or whatever. I didn't feel right just not asking somebody, so I just kind of left it there. But a couple weeks later, I was talking to a friend of mine named Larry Chum. We know him as Pokey. He dances out at the Opry. And also a great guitar player and singer in the style of Jimmy Martin. And he was buddies with Jimmy Martin. And he told me that, I was telling him about visiting out there and that furniture being in the carport that was actually in Jimmy's den in his house. They had moved it out to the carport. And he said, you know where that came from? And I go, no. And he goes, that came out of Hank and Audrey Williams' house. And I said, you got to be kidding me. He goes, nope, that's where it came from. And I was at the Hall of Fame one day, and I'm walking around the Country Music Hall of Fame, and there's this picture of Audrey Williams with Hank Jr. and Lucretia sitting on that couch watching one of those old vintage televisions, And they had all this cowboy kitsch in the living room on the walls and stuff. And sure enough, it looked like the same furniture. So here in Nashville, we just have to assume it went from Hank and Audrey's to Jimmy Martin's. I don't know how, but I'd like to know how. A bunch of friends of mine kind of came in and out of his band at different times. And he had a couple of guys that were with him for years. And then bass players were kind of hard for him to keep. And so that's how I got to play with him, was he came to Bean Blossom and needed a bass player. And we had invited him to breakfast at our campsite, and we didn't expect him to show up, of course. So after a whole night of jamming and beer drinking and carrying on, about 8 o'clock in the morning, we hear this golf cart pull up, and it's Jimmy Martin. And it's like, Dan, if he didn't come and have breakfast with us. We'd crawl out of a tent, and it's like, Jimmy, I thought you was going to have breakfast. He'd say, breakfast for me. And I said, man, I'm sorry, we just kind of slept in a little bit this morning. But he had brought like an egg sandwich with him or something in a wrapper. So he had brought he was smart, knew to bring breakfast with him. And I have a picture of me singing with him at about 9 o'clock in the morning at our campsite. And it's a classic. I mean, for some reason, he liked to sing with me. I don't know. But he liked to get your voices where they would tone together. And he had a whole thing where he would take a song like I'm Going Back to Old Kentucky. They had these long vowels that he would hold out. I'm going back. Now get with me. And he wanted you to get that volume the same so your voices would vibrate together, And he just, get up against his voice. And really that's the way Bill Monroe sang. You had to get right up with him so that you were just as powerful, And he always said, that the Sunny Mountain Boys would always practice going down the road. They'd always be working on their music and singing harmony and all this kind of stuff, and working on the tunes and writing, and because they were all in a car together like this. And then he said the worst thing that ever happened to this music business is the tour bus, because everybody just wants to go to bed instead of work on my music. And he always felt everybody just felt a little short in his music, except for the Paul Williams and J.D. Crowe and the guys that helped him create his sound. So that was your standard you had to come up to. And he was kind of a taskmaster, that kind of thing. The very first session I ever did in Nashville was a record that I did with Audie Blaylock, who played mandolin with him for years. And Jimmy Martin was actually producing the record. And I didn't know Jimmy Martin hardly at all. I just moved to Nashville. But one of the things that he liked was on a waltz tune, in between this phrasing of the singing, he wanted you to walk the bass, boom, 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 and then come back straight underneath the singing. And it just propelled his music. And if you listen to his records and stuff, you'll hear that, like in between the swells, in between the phrasing of his singing, And I just remember him poking me in the shoulder. Put it in there, right there. When he wanted you to walk, he started poking me in the shoulder. And he was kind of aggressive that way. I called him, I have another picture where he's got a hand on my shoulder and a hand on my arm, and I called it Jimmy Martin, full contact. But yeah, he was a lot of fun. He was something else. I played at Bean Blossom with him one time with Ralph Stanley was his special guest, and they'd made a record together years earlier, and so whenever they got together, they would always do one or two songs off of that record so that Jimmy Martin could sell a few. And one of them was called Rabbit in the Log, an old Monroe Brothers duet. And so that's how they themed the show, getting the rabbit out of the log with Jimmy Martin and special guest Ralph Stanley, Bean Blossom. And I had seen this log backstage, and we'd got out on stage with him, and Jimmy, backtrack a little bit before that, we bought all these hats at the local hardware store before I knew I was going to play bass with him. We'd been down to Nashville, Indiana, and we went to the hardware store for something, and they had all these straw hats for $1. And so we thought, well, let's just buy a big handful of these things, and we'll paint them red and sit down in front of the stage for Jimmy Martin's show. And we'll be like the Red Hat Club, Jimmy Martin fan club. So later on, they asked me to play, so I get out on stage with him, and a buddy of ours from our camp, when Ralph Stanley came out, he handed all those hats out to everybody in the Clinch Mountain Boys, and the entire Ralph Stanley and his entire band came out wearing these red hats that we had painted. And Jimmy Martin said, "For once in my life, I'm speechless." And so when it came time to do Rabbit in the Log, they dragged this big log out on the stage. And I had seen it backstage, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't notice it had a handle on it. And it turned out it was hollow. And they opened up the ends of this log, and nothing happened. So somebody from backstage came and picked the log up and shook it like that, and 3 rabbits fall out on the stage out of this log. And Jimmy looks down at him, and he says, "Well, hell, those aren't wild rabbits. Those are tame rabbits." And he picked them up one by one and just chucked them off the stage into the audience. And I just was, I would give anything to find a little film clip of that. And somebody has it on video. Somebody has to have that on video, but it hasn't made it to YouTube yet. If that's, if you can believe it, it's not made it to YouTube yet. And there's a lot of Jimmy Martin on YouTube. So, but that was a classic. I remember hearing that they got a little mail on that one. Yeah, he's one of the few people I think that put his gravestone up before he died, and he always said, "Well, if you want it to be done right, you better as well do it yourself," which is pretty sage advice when you're as a controversial figure as Jimmy Martin. But he put his stone up, and he had it done the way he wanted. And then Marty Stewart had him come over and took his picture. It's in one of Marty's books, and he's in full stage dress, standing next to his own gravestone. And I think the caption says something like, some people would think this is strange. The hat that he wears in the picture on the stone is kind of it's a real decorative, kind of like a rodeo hat. And Charlie Cushman told me he was with him when he got this hat, and they stopped at Loretta Lynn's out in Hurricane Mills on the road somewhere, on the way somewhere. And she had a Western store out there at the time, and this was a ladies' rodeo hat. And he just liked it because it was colorful and eye-catching, good for the stage. And so that's where he got it, and he wore it after that. And now it's on his tombstone, yeah. You've never seen anybody wear a hat like that, I guarantee you. There's a great clip on YouTube of Jimmy on the Wilburn Brothers show singing "When the Savior Reached Down for Me," gospel song on there. And he's wearing that hat. And it is just one of the greatest performances you could ever imagine. It's just so good. It's so great. Nobody loved a microphone and a camera more than Jimmy Martin. Or maybe it could be that the microphone and the camera loved nobody better than somebody like Jimmy Martin, this colorful character full of personality. But aside from the personality, he had the goods. The guy could sing as good as George Jones, in my opinion. And I'd say that George Jones would probably say the same about him, That's how good he was. Because the passion of his singing and what he loved about music always came through, The rhythm and just the timing and his phrasing of singing is just, it's just unbeatable. And I think, Jimmy Martin's impact on bluegrass, he was a controversial figure. He was a little unfiltered for a lot of people, but at the same time, his music is perfection. And there's a famous picture somewhere that shows all of the Decca artists on the jukebox ratings or whatever. And he was the '1 jukebox artist. And we're talking in the mid-'60s with people like Patsy Cline and whatever other Decca artists, He was competing with all of them, but he was the king of the jukebox. He knew how to get that music on there and get people to respond to it. His funeral was in a church over near his home in Hermitage over there. And I just remember he had this gigantic bouquet. There was one gigantic bouquet. There was a lot of flowers and stuff there, but there was one gigantic bouquet. And his son Ray came over. He goes, "You see where that came from?" I said, "No, who was it?" He goes, "Hermitage Liquor Store." So he was a good customer for decades, apparently, at Hermitage Liquor Store. I don't know if that's why he was in town or on his way out of town or when he got back in town. I'm not sure, but they knew him.
If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, subscribe to my channel and tell me down below what your favorite Jimmy Martin song is, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.